Firing it up. We're going live on YouTube. Boop-a-doo-doo. Going live on YouTube.
Jazz hands.
Here we go. Yes, going live. We're so excited. Here we go. Hey, hi everybody. It's me, Jennifer, Little Metal Foxes. And I've got Julia.
Also from Little Metal Foxes.
And Helen.
Also from Little Metal Foxes.
And we have a guest with us today. Helen, do you want to introduce our special guest today?
I would love to introduce Teresa. Teresa Kiplinger is an artist that I stumbled across on Instagram. She inspired me to make my little skull rings, which you can, kind of wearing in honor of our interview today. And because I'm also very interested in memento mori, and just to show off a little bit, this is one of my glass pieces that is part of my memento mori stuff, that where this would be eventually be like for ashes and stuff like that. Anyway, I reached out to her because we were all three of us, we were just like, oh my God, her work is so awesome. And so I reached out and asked if she wanted to do a tooltips, and here she is. And I'm very, very, very excited. Yeah. Especially when like her little tornado put the cows in there. I thought that was great.
I missed that. What was that?
Oh, her enamels with the tornadoes with the cows in there. I thought those were particularly humorous and on point.
Yeah, love them.
Those are fun.
So Teresa, hi. Tell us, give us where you are and a little bit about you.
Where I am literally or figuratively?
Yeah, sure.
Where I am literally is in my studio. Where I am figuratively is I started learning metals about 10 years ago. I was going through a divorce and I was looking for something to kind of keep myself busy, and I took my first metals workshop and fell in love. And I've been a graphic designer for about 30 years. And so I have this kind of desire to combine imagery and text, is sort of an important aesthetic in my work. So the techniques that I use mainly in my work are vitreous enameling, hand-painted vitreous enameling, chasing and repousse, etching, and hand engraving. And what I thought we could do today is could show you my work and a little bit of the tools that I use to do the chasing and repousse and engraving. Yes. I'm very new to engraving, so apologize to any pros that are watching, but I can share with you a beginner's perspective on that.
That'd be great.
It's fabulous, right? And I mean, I don't know, I've seen your engraving, and you just started just a few months ago. You can tell people when, and I am gobsmacked at the quality of your lines. And
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's very nice.
I feel there have some talent there.
Yeah. I think sometimes too with for people that are learning any new skill, one of the things that you have to be able to do is, if you're committed to learning it and you're putting in the time and the work and understanding, learning to understand the tools and the process and getting your hands dirty, doing, hours worth of practice is what it takes to do this. Right. And some of the best engravers that I've ever seen are usually people that come from an illustration background as well, mm-hmm. and drawing background. So they have a sense of line. They understand what line quality means. They understand what, that kind of dimensionality when it comes to a brush stroke or that linear, sort of engraved look. And it translates really well to engraving. So understanding how to write with that tool or draw with that tool becomes, I think, a little bit easier for people that have a sense or an understanding of line to begin with.
Yeah, that's definitely true. The one thing that I've learned from befriending lots of engravers in the last year is that the first thing you should work on is drawing.
Yeah.
Before you start cutting. If you don't already have that skill, you really do need it for this.
Yeah. Well, how long have you been doing the enameling as well? So you've been working on
enameling. Enameling is one of the first techniques that I learned because it was a means to an end. I've had these images in my head of jewelry pieces that are combinations of imagery and text. And so I've just been searching for the last decade the techniques that'll allow me to do that. So I finally found enameling and etching kind of at the same time. And I was using a lot of etching to incorporate original poetry in my work. And then I was using the enameling to hand paint little scenes. And gosh, that's probably been 7 years ago I started enameling and etching. The first 2 years of my journey in metalsmithing were just fumbling around, not knowing what I was doing, ruining a lot of things, taking workshops and so forth. But in earnest, I really...
You have to take the workshops. You have to figure out which doors you want to close in order to figure out which doors you want to really like commit to going through, you know? Like,
it's true.
It's all compost. It's all fodder for the later stuff to know like what you're not going to do, you know, in my opinion.
True.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to start eliminating those things.
And your drawing quality, your graphic design quality on these pieces is lovely. They almost seem like little, like every one of them is like a little thumbnail sketch, but they're so thoroughly worked out as well that they're just absolutely elegant. So can you show us some of those?
Yeah, sure. So I have some pieces that kind of represent all of the techniques that I use. I kind of pulled these out to share with you. So this is a piece that has chasing and repousse, and I don't know how well you can see this, chasing and repousse with bamboo for the gold. And it's a little, I have a series of pieces called Tiny Catastrophes, and they all depict end times events and cataclysmic disasters. This is how I cope with my personal anxiety. So this is my therapy. And then you can see on the, I know this is backwards for you probably, but then there's etching, little caption on the edge there. And then this piece is like a totally different vibe. But this is a woman with birds in her hair, and I call it the sleepwalker because she's walking and dreaming of these birds in her hair. This is also chasing and repousse with bamboo and also etching. So you can see here, there's an original poem etched along the bottom here.
Yeah.
So did you etch the material first, or did you chase it first and then?
Etched first. Then chased, then bamboo.
Okay. Yeah. So you had to be super careful not to damage your etching while you were doing that chasing and repousse. Yeah. Not a trivial task.
It's not. I've learned a lot of tricks for that, and I got some tools out to talk about that if anybody's interested. And then just, you know, more of the chasing. I spent about a year doing nothing but chasing and repousse, and then this is my handwriting scribed into a resist and etched. Another original poem. And then the enameling is typically smaller, and they're just hand painted little scenes, and then I usually etch or engrave the bezels with original poetry. So obviously that is a ring, and so these are hand painted and torch fired. The enamels.
Torch fired. All right. Okay. That's awesome. Do you have a kiln?
I have a kiln. I only use it if I'm working on something really big, which is rare. But I love torch firing enamels. Hi, puppy. Because I like to watch the stages, and the China paints are so thin that you can really easily overfire them. So I prefer to just watch them with the torch.
And that's when you do your images is China paint.
Yeah.
Okay.
There it is.
There's a little
my inspo.
And then so since I started engraving, of course, because these are these little memento mori pieces that, you know, originate from the 1600s, 1700s, 1800s. It's part of why I wanted to learn traditional hand engraving. So I've etched the words memento mori in the side of this one, or engraved memento mori in the side of this one. And then as I've been getting more and more into engraving, these are some of the most recent pieces that I've done with banknote style, copper plate style engraving.
Right.
And then
Hey.
also putting original poetry on the,
Oh,
gosh,
yeah.
I'm doing a terrible job at this.
No, it's but the
are you familiar with the like the lover's eye?
Of course.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
That's what those reminded me
Obsessed.
of immediately. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Love those.
You know, if you look back in history, there's just eyes in every art form and every technique. It's just a perpetual source of fascination, it seems like.
Yes, absolutely.
But I have a whole series of these that I've been working on. And then here's another.
You just put a bunch of them on
enameled.
Instagram that were lovely.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that's a new collection that
Yeah.
I'm working on. So this is another teeny tiny little scene. It's a woman with more birds in her hair.
Oh my
Imagine
gosh.
that. I follow these themes. And
Oh.
then there's an original poem hand engraved around the bezel of that too.
What do you put
So that kind of gives you
your enamels? I'm assuming there's something underneath to lift them up, because I imagine the enamels aren't actually very thick, right? But you wanted to have enough
No, they're very thin.
to engrave on, so you wanted your bezel to be higher. What do you put behind them?
That's one of those questions that I get constantly. There's a handful of ways that you can do that. Sometimes I stack sheets of acrylic cut to fit inside the bezel. Sometimes I use cob meal, which is what, you know, Native American jewelers like to use to raise their turquoise. Sometimes it depends on the setting and the piece and how it's going to be used and handled. I've recently tried this kooky experiment. Yeah, well, it doesn't break down, but I'm just thoughtful about, like, if the setting is, there's like all these considerations that go into like which of these things that I use. You can also create a step bezel. I don't like that because it's such a hard surface for the enamel to sit on, that when you're, you know, working on the bezel, it can get a bit spooky with a with a piece of glass, even though enamel's pretty durable, you know. So another thing that I just recently started experimenting with was this idea that I could create custom plugs out of polymer clay shaped to the bezel and then bake them and put those inside. And
smart.
That polymer clay is so light. I know, I was really proud of myself. I was like, this is genius. It doesn't really work. So it's like as much work as cutting acrylic, or like, it's just, it doesn't save any time. And it also is like weightier than you would think, like on a ring, for example. So I haven't perfected it yet. I'll probably keep tinkering with that idea, but so far it's not really working. So but yeah, you have to lift those up because the enamels are, you know, very thin.
Right.
And then this is just another little chase and repousse piece of a dead bird on a seashore with bamboo. So, and then just to show you the back of this, people always want to see the back of so this is the little front. This is an unfinished chase piece. But just to show you the back, repousse is done by working dimension up from the back and then texture and detail down from the top, and you flip and you flip and you flip until you reach, you know, the dimension that you want. So like some of these pieces have quite a bit of dimension in them. People also always want to know what gauge. This is 22, I think, gauge.
Quite light.
And you can see, you can get, it's very light, very lovely, but you can get a lot of depth out of it.
Very nice.
I think there's a tear in here somewhere, but I dare you to find it. I patched it. So yeah, so that's kind of like a little
cool
bit of my work and how I use all those techniques in it.
Cool.
And then I have behind me here a lot of chasing and repousse tools.
Right.
If you'd like to talk about that.
Yeah.
Talk about favorite tools.
I'm fascinated with the thanks for showing us that. I'm fascinated with your little assortment of jars full of tools that you've got.
Yes.
There. Yeah.
So you know how like we're always in constant search of like processes, methods, efficiencies, organizational tools. So my favorite little thing is I have this bamboo silverware container, and I glued little bits of, I don't even know what those are, dowels or something in here, so that I could put all my different shape chasing tools in this little container and keep
Smart.
them. I store them like this with lids, and then I tip them down when I'm working so that I can see the edges of the tool when I'm looking for the one I want. And I've got them organized in my own weird little way. It makes sense to me, but I've got them organized by shape and purpose, depending on the tools. And I use these different color-coded pieces of rubber tape to help myself know, like, okay, these are the squares, these are the rounds, and so on. So when I'm working, all of my tools are right here, and this makes it very easy to find them. These are Liza Nishampkin's chasing tools almost exclusively. I've even had her make me a custom set of teensy tiny little chasing and repousse tools so that I can make this teeny little like jewelry scale work and get into those real small spaces. I'm learning to make my own tools now, but at the time when I started chasing and repousse in 2020 during lockdowns is when I decided to learn. And so you can see, but then I still use, sometimes you need, this is from Shane Charleston. This is one of his great big honkin', tools. So I've got a pretty decent little variety here. But for those who aren't familiar, the rounded tools are typically used for the repousse, which is working the piece from the back. I know y'all know this, but just in case anybody's watching and is interested. Yeah, and then there's like angled tools for lifting dimension. By that I mean they've got these little chisel ends on them. And then the liners for doing texture and thing, you can see these are much more fine.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Do you have a favorite that you kind of like reach for all the time?
I do. You know what? Liza has her little ovals. Let me show you. Let me try to grab a few. This is like the story of my life when I'm doing repousse. I'm just in here like digging through all these little things. These shapes I use constantly.
Oh yeah.
And I know she has some sets. I think she's got like a 9 or a 12 piece set that has, I think, all of these in it, and then some squares and some liners. But this is these are just great for building up that dimension. I do a lot of birds and a lot of meteors for some reason, tornadoes, things like that. These are great for all those shapes as it happens. Here's a little tip too. I also like to keep, you get those little desiccant tablets that come in medications and things like that. I have a lot of moisture in my studio, so I keep these in with all of my tools, and then I seal them up in these little Calenti gelato.
Gotta love the Calenti.
They're the best.
Everybody loves those. I
They're
know
the
they are the perfect jar.
We actually have a question.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
So Teresa, what do you wrap your chisels with for holding comfortably?
So I use electrical tape at first, and because I thought that that's what I was supposed to do. And then I learned from a class with Nancy Megan Corwin, whose book I was studying when I wrapped these in electrical tape. She actually uses rubber tape, which is like a little bit different. It doesn't have the gummy gluiness that electrical tape has. So don't do what I did. Don't use that. It's not a loss if you've already done it, because what I started to do was then I went through and I got proper rubber tape and I started going over the electrical with one more layer just to keep that like gluiness from wicking out.
Right.
But like I have carpal tunnel in both hands and my hands go numb when I'm doing this. So having that extra padding, like just to show you what some of these tools look like. That's a chunky one. A lot of them are like super, super thin. And that's really hard for me to.
Yeah, very pinchy, not good for the carpal tunnel. Yeah,
not good for that. So that's why I like to wrap them too. And some of them I'll really wrap that I use a lot, or that I tend to like spend more time with these tools. I'll wrap them even more to try to like bulk them up a little bit because my hands just want to go numb.
So this rubber tape, and then have adhesive on one side, the rubber tape.
I don't think the rubber tape has any adhesive. I think what you do is you pull it, and that kind of helps it stick to itself.
Okay. And so when you get to the end, pull it and it just stretches and it's really thin and then it just sticks down. Okay.
Yeah. You can also use, I also have some of these that I used athletic tape. I don't remember which one it is, but that athletic tape kind of works pretty well too. It's based on the same principle.
And
it is softer. I kind of like that. It depends on how you like to work.
Right.
Like I know that like Liza Nishampkin, she makes these tools. She taught me, she does not wrap her tools in anything. And God bless her. I don't know how her hands have survived all these years, but I just can't do that. She calls me a lightweight all the time because I can't handle it. I have to wrap my tools. Love you, Liza.
So what is your go-to hammer?
What's that?
What's your go-to hammer and weight?
So this is also Liza's pistol grip chasing hammer.
Lovely.
I use this like 85% of the time. It's, I guess you would call it a medium weight. I don't know in ounces, off because the numbers don't stay in my head. But this is the only hammer that Liza makes. So if you're interested in it, you can find it quickly because it's the only one that she makes. It's just got a lot of springiness. The handle feels really good in my hand. It suits me really well. And whatever she does with the tempering or whatever that's called with this, it really, if you get into that sweet spot, this hammer does so much work for you.
Right.
So that's why I love it. I also have this Big Daddy. This is a frets, and this sucker is really heavy, and I use that if I'm doing really deep repousse. That's the only time I use it. It's rare, but you kind of have to have one of these, in your arsenal if you're going to do try to build depth. I also have this little Kinko hammer. This is my latest little endeavor to just try one of these. I needed something for really subtle textural details, and I'm really heavy-handed. I've learned that with my engraving too. I'm just heavy-handed, and so this helps me I don't have to control my muscles as much and the pressure as much. So it's kind of like cheating.
Yeah. So
this little dude is really light, and I'm trying to learn how to handle it because it feels extremely different than the pistol grips. It's just kind of one of these situations, and I'm not great at that either because I want to just hammer on things. But those are the hammers that I pretty much use. I also have this little, it's kind of in between these guys. This little frets is sort of a medium weight, but you can see the face is a little bit smaller than Liza's, and the bigger the face, the easier the chasing. So that's another thing to think about when you're looking for hammers for this.
So when you started doing repousse and chasing, you're doing primarily sort of a Western style, right? Sort of repousse and chasing.
Yeah, I mean, all I know is that it isn't Eastern style.
Yeah.
But I've looked at some of that, and that's not what I do. I don't know what I do. I mean, Liza's been helping me kind of understand the techniques behind traditional European style chasing in repousse.
Right.
From 1800s era is kind of my jam, if you haven't noticed. And so she's teaching me, she'll hop on and give me she'll just text me things and give me little tips. Like, if you see this texture here, it's really subtle, but on the edges of this, do you see how it's catching the light? So you're allowing the hammer marks to show, but it's not dimpled, it's kind of more like stripes.
Planished, like a planished sort of surface. Yeah.
Yeah. So she taught me that little planishing technique on the fly. So again, you have to remember, I only started chasing in repousse in 2020 during pandemic lockdowns.
Oh my
and
God.
So I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just making it up.
No.
So
well, you're
making it up beautifully.
You're doing it.
Well, thank you.
You're making up, stuff that works. So that's all that matters.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, that's what you got to do, especially 2020, you're not going anywhere for any classes. So I took a class with Liza up here in Cleveland in, gosh, it was probably 2018. And then I bought all her tools when she was there and didn't touch them until pandemic lockdowns, like 3 years later, 2 years later.
So that you had the class and you had the stuff. So yes, you're really rusty, but at least, you had a jumping off place to go to the thing with, rather than starting completely cold. So, and hey, also wonderful recommendation for you take a class, and sometimes it has to just gestate for a while before it emerges in your work,
Yeah.
It's true.
Little time for it to synthesize, sometimes you have to kind of like have to let it digest, to be able to.
Or, you just wait for a global pandemic.
Yeah, that too.
And then you get the tools out.
There you go.
Like, honestly, I remember thinking, man, I spent a lot of money on these tools and they're just collecting dust. Why did I do that? And then 2020, I was stuck in here and I was like, there's no better time to learn a tedious, really deeply involved technique. Right. So it was like perfect timing.
A room alone and do nothing but pound metal.
Listen to exactly audiobooks and lots of tapping.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
But I do remember too, and this is something that if I can be helpful in this way, I remember being very intimidated by chasing and repousse. It was something I knew I wanted to learn for years before I even took Liza's class in 2018. But the pitch weirded me out. The tools and the variety of tools that you need, I didn't know what to get or where to go. I didn't understand chasing hammers at all, or what made a good one or not a good one. And so a lot of that stuff, especially pitch really scared me inexplicably, because I think I had seen people burning off their pitch with their torch, which, by the way, please don't do that. Please don't do that. There's no reason to do that. You're just polluting your space. You're hurting your lung. I just don't know why people do that. I mean, I guess if you're stuck in a jam and you have to. Yeah. My personal take on it is protect your lungs. Don't burn the pitch off.
Right.
And so I learned that you can just gently melt it off with a heat gun, and it's it doesn't have to be all that crazy, scary flames coming off of your pitch. So,
right. Well, and so many different kinds.
Huge asset to the chasing and repousse world, right? Like the small heat guns that you can get that are
totally
little tiny and easy to hold. I mean, I have a couple that are big. They're like the big old hair dryers. And now you have these little tiny, really agile ones. And it's I guess back when all you had was a torch, then you had to burn it off. But
that's true.
Why not? Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's if that's your thing and that's what you want to do and you have fun burning pitch, cool.
Do it outside.
It just kept me from doing it, from even venturing into it for years, because I thought that's how you had to do it. And I knew that's not something I wanted to be fiddling with.
Well, there's so many different kinds of pitch as well. Yeah. So, knowing the right one, finding the right one, making the right one, it can make a huge difference in how the metal responds. It can make a big difference in how if you're working and you're really heavy-handed, it can be very different from somebody who's working and needs something that has a little more play to it. So, not all pitches are going to be great for every single person and every single application. So
I only use Nishamkin medium chasers pitch. I've never used any other kind of pitch either, by the way. Again, don't do as I do. I'm just telling you, this is how I improvised my way through the pandemic.
Yeah.
And
I know that
it works for me.
Here, Nancy Megan Corwin was using some of the Pacific pitch, the green Pacific pitch here. And there were
Northwest Pitchworks. It was Ann Prozakowski.
You can't get that.
No,
you can't get that now.
What happened? She gave, or is it, who is it that's making it? It's not, somebody else is using
Liza Nishamkin's making it.
Liza has the recipe. So Anne and Liza, I was just going to look that up, but thank you for clarifying that. So yes, but what was Northwest Pitchworks, which is what I have, has now become the Nishamkin pitch, because she's got I think she may have adapted it a bit, but certainly no.
I don't know if they're even the same. I don't know if that's the connection, but I do know that the consistency is similar, according to Nancy. And since you can't get the Northwest Pitchworks, I gather that Liza's is a good replacement for that.
Right.
But it's, you know, I haven't moved into any other pitches. My problem is I get excited by another technique, and then like with all of this stuff, I was like so into chasing a repousse for 2 years, and then I decided to learn engraving, and then I started pouring my money into my engraving tools. So these are the repousse tools I'll probably have for a while, because right now I'm investing in other techniques, which is what I tend to do, good or bad. It's kind of how I roll. So
well, you pull it all together beautifully. It really does speak to your sense of artistry and your vision that you have for what you're doing. It's absolutely lovely. So
I appreciate that. Thanks.
Sharing with us.
So we do have a couple more questions from the internet. One wants to talk about what kind of tools that you use for your enameling, and then what are your kind of design aesthetic inspirations, and do you reticulate any of your metal before you do your repousse? Which I'm gonna guess no, but yeah.
I mean, maybe they mean annealing. I don't know anything about reticulation with repousse. Maybe that's a thing that I'm not familiar with. I do start with dead soft fine silver for most of my chasing and repousse, so it really does not need too much in the way of annealing. But of course, as you work it, you have to continue to re-anneal, which is one of the reasons I love fine silver, because you don't have fire stain and all of that you have to contend with. I'm sorry, that's the one question I remember. What were the other two?
Well, you wouldn't be reticulating fine silver anyway, because reticulation only works if you're using
on sterling
alloy, right? So yeah,
I just don't know why you would.
Some of the textures.
Is that a thing?
No.
Okay.
No.
I'm so sorry for whoever asked that. I apologize. It's something. If that is a thing, none of us are familiar with it, but but you do have to re-anneal.
The questioner could do it.
Yeah, normally
reticulate and then chase.
Yeah, normally reticulation is done on a sterling alloy, or something that is like, a sterling alloy where you have like fine silver on the surface and like sterling kind of below. But sterling can be very difficult over time to repousse and chase because it does harden more quickly, and like you said, it does fire stain. So I think that if somebody was looking at your work and saw all of the really beautiful lines and things, that you're actually chasing those in. Those aren't reticulated.
Oh yeah. That's a good point. Like all of this, none of this is reticulation.
Right.
All of this is using, just to give you a one-to-one for those of you who haven't done chasing, like, so all of these tiny little hairs were done with a tool like this.
Nice. Yes.
With a jillion hammer blows, which is why I have a frozen shoulder now.
Oh God.
I know it's terrible, but
doing repousse and chasing on a reticulated surface would be not just difficult, but next to impossible, because reticulated metal varies in thickness. So, because it's moving, so you would never really know where you were about to punch through and where you weren't, because the metal varies so much in thickness with reticulated metals. It'd be a real trick to do.
But hey, if that's your jam,
do
it, lean in, and then come on Little Metal Foxes and tell everybody about it.
Exactly.
Because it's all fair.
We want to know. So
what was the other two questions? I forgot them.
Yeah, one was about your enameling tools. Just what do you use? And then just like design inspiration.
Okay. Enameling tools, I torch fire almost everything. I use a butane torch. Let me grab one so you can see. I know everybody says, what? You use butane? I know, it's insane. I have an acetylene torch here, air acetylene. And when the pandemic happened, I ran out of gas. I couldn't get it filled. And I just started improvising for like these big cuffs. I soldered these with butane.
Hot damn, girl.
Wow.
I soldered this 8 gauge wire with butane. Admittedly, I had 2 torches going at the same time. Not something I would recommend for safety purposes, but it works.
I've done that. I've done that with propane torches, which are only a little bit hotter than the butane. Same thing. It's like if the mass is too much for one torch, you're just going to have to get a second torch in there.
Yeah, you make yourself a little forge with fire bricks, and you know.
Put it on the deck, and the other one on, and then you pick up the first one, and then you're like cowboying it with both hands, right? Like needs must.
Kind of fun. Kind of makes you feel like you're a baddie, you know.
That's
let me show you.
Yep.
I'll show you too. So like I wasn't planning on doing this. So this is the little tripod that I torch fire on. And I'll just set my work on one of these little tripods on the screen on this doohickey. And then you fire from underneath.
Yeah. And
don't get too close because you'll burn it out, you know. Just nice, slow and low. And also don't forget to wear your protective glasses when you're doing that. People forget to do that with torch firing. Let me put these away. And so that's how I fire. I do have a little Paragon kiln, but I just only use it for like really big pieces, and I don't do really big pieces very often. Yeah. Let's see. And then I just have like jillions of tiny little eensy beansy brushes and little scribes and needles hooked onto bamboo sticks and things like that for you know, scraping and adding detail and that type of thing.
Cool.
And then inspiration for my work is, I'm looking back here because it's kind of all around me. I use my own poetry as like the impetus typically for themes of my collections or my own writing or journal entries. Sometimes they get actually inscribed. The words actually get inscribed into my work. Sometimes I'm just trying to capture a feeling or a mood from a poem or depict a little scene from a poem. So that's number one. Like that's just how I immediately naturally started coming up with my own voice and exploring different concepts for my work. And then aesthetically, I am obsessed with 1700s, 1800s mourning jewelry and Victorian era decorative metals and ornamentation and all of that stuff. I just love it. But I also don't want to just replicate that because that's not very exciting. So what I love doing is kind of trying to borrow from those aesthetics and then make them my own and make them kind of like this weird blend of modern and Victorian where you're not quite sure when it came from. Kind of like to try to blur those lines. And I hope this like 100 years from now, if somebody finds one of my pieces under a rock, they're going to be like, what is this and when was it made? That's kind of my goal.
And you'll be like, excellent. They're confused.
Somewhere in the universe, I'll be like, it worked.
I love it. Well, we all really love the aesthetic of your work, and you know,
thank you. I appreciate that.
Particularly is attracted to the memento mori aspect, but yeah, mourning jewelry and hair jewelry and jet jewelry, you know, all of those things I've always found really fascinating, and the kind of the adornments of grief, I guess, and you know, the publicness of that, while it's really a very private feeling, is just really interesting. We don't grieve well in this culture. We don't grieve very openly, and so I think anytime that there's a space, that you make a space for people to feel sad and have that be okay, it is wonderful. You know, it's really healing.
And I also find that like my modern take on memento mori is kind of like, philosophically, it folds in these notions of life is brief, so live in the moment, which is not what the Victorians wanted you to be more pious in your life so that you would go to heaven and be saved. But I kind of think in the modern day, that's sort of how I look at it, is this reminder that life is fragile and not to waste it or squander your time. Mm-hmm. I also think that loads of people suffer with anxiety. I suffer with anxiety, and one of my coping mechanisms with my tiny catastrophes that show the tsunamis and tornadoes and things like that were just a way for me to reduce all of my worst anxieties down into little harmless jewels and pieces of beauty. And so that's kind of like how I have a modern take on memento mori, I think, is that it's more about the brevity of life and you can laugh at it and you can be sad about it all at the same time. So, and it just depends on my mood and where I am emotionally, which direction I go with my
Which is
my
so
work.
frequently how things, it's like it totally depends on where you are, how things are going to strike you. Are they're going to make you laugh, or are they going to make you cry? So yeah,
totally.
Sometimes
I know. Like I had some people reach out when I did my last Tiny Catastrophes collection release of a woman who had been through a tornado, and for her it was a very profound like a memento of that survival. And then other people were like, the cows in the tornado are hilarious, so it just but that's art, right? You just let people feel how they're going to feel about it. But yeah.
Well, and good art speaks to lots of people in different ways, right? It allows for multiple interpretations, and it allows for ownership from all of these different people as they, say this is mine because of this aspect of it, So, yeah, I love that,
yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about your engraving journey?
Sure. Yeah, so I told the girls before we got on, I've got my camera stacked on a pile of books. So let's see if I can not tip us over here. This is my, not bad. This is my little engraving setup. And
a nice microscope as well as beautiful engraver's ball.
Yep, microscope. This is my engraving ball. I am constantly struggling to understand the best work holding situation. So I have a GRS satellite turntable down here on a rickety old stool that I use sometimes. And then I've got this shelf. Engravers will tell you this is better. A different engraver will tell you this is better. So I'm trying to find my own way with that. And then this is right. And then this is something I learned really quickly I was going to have to spring for. I thought I could use my magnifying visor for this, and you just really, you can do it with a visor, but if you can afford a microscope, it's definitely worthwhile. So this is a Leica A60, and I'm using for my power assisted engraving. This is the Lindsay Airgraver Classic by Steve Lindsay. And I absolutely love it. I use it with a silent air compressor so that it doesn't give you a heart attack every time the air compressor comes back on.
No, an important.
And then it is very important. I know. I mean, you're having your creative flow, and then oh my god.
Well, and it's like if you're making work that's all about addressing your anxiety, the last thing you need
Agree.
Like going
absolutely. And those compressors are pricey, but they're worth every penny.
Right.
Absolutely, because you don't even notice it. It's just like you hear a little click, and that's pretty much it. They're fantastic. So yeah, this is the setup, and I have learned, and I guess I'm sharing this mostly for anybody who's interested in engraving and intimidated by it, because just like I was intimidated by pitch, I was intimidated by graver sharpening, because what you'll hear in the forums is sharpening, and oh, sharpening is so hard. And it kept me from trying this for years. I've learned not to pay attention to those things. Finally, I'm just like, no, I'm just going to do it. But it sounds very complicated. There's all kinds of geometry. There's different types of graver geometries for different types of cutting. And I'm still learning about all of that, but it's doable. So if you're intimidated by it, just don't be. There are systems out there that allow you to sharpen your gravers to precise angles without having to do it by hand. Right. They used to do this all by hand, and it was very hard to master that technique. Also
finding the right speaking of pitch, but in a different way, finding the right pitch angle for you when you're engraving, and finding the right bite, and finding the right
it's so hard,
temperature, and all those things. A lot of times you can't. I think a lot of times people expect that to be able to be just bought and it's going to last forever. with this edge, and that's not how it works. You're constantly sharpening and adapting these tools for your uses. And that's part of the thing, it's just part of the practice. You have to
it is. And like
doing it.
The sooner you embrace that, the better off you'll be. Like, just, okay, you're just going to have to be sharpening this thing. So get good at it and just get over it, but like I said, there are different systems and tools that you can use that make that a little bit easier. And also, if you're working in precious metals like silver and gold, you hardly have to resharpen at all. It's really if you're working in steel, bronze, brass, things like that, that it causes a little bit more trouble. But even with copper, you can go a long time without having to sharpen these gravers. Usually for me, because I am working in silver, the only time I have to resharpen is if I drop a graver, and then I shout some expletives and start sharpening. But yeah, and like I'm learning how to make. So like what I learned on was I took a 2-day class with an engraver here in Ohio, and what I learned on originally was these big honkin' gravers. This is pretty darn big. If you look at this under a microscope, it's like ginormous. I didn't realize that when I first started sharpening gravers. And then friends of mine in the Enamelist Society and lots of friends of mine, like Paul Lowe, thank you, Paul. These little microgravers are what he taught me how to create from, like, I don't know, 16th inch steel rod, 1/8 inch steel rod, or carbide. And these are so much tinier to engrave with.
Okay.
And so when you're working on jewelry scale, like if you're a bright cut engraver and you're working on a belt buckle, you can kind of dig in there with these bigger ones. But for me, I'm doing script that is, and that's big in the grand scheme of things. I don't know if you can see that. So I really needed like tinier, tools for this. And so these microgravers are great for that. But I love the Lindsay. I know a lot of people also use the GRS setup. There are a handful of like competing products out there. Most of the engravers that I have become friends with have them all. So you want to talk about like a tool rabbit hole? Engraving's just bad because there's just so much to buy and have fun with. But most people have like a GRS and a Lindsay, and sometimes they have the pulse graver too. Different sharpening systems and things like that. Lots of work holding things to spend your money on, I'm finding. So yeah, but that's pretty much it.
Once you kind of find your way, find your tool of choice and the way that usually works, it's usually going to be those go-to tools to the time. You've got your go-tos. But again, I think that takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of just getting, familiar with the tools as you're working. And, some people, are making their tools from scratch, and that's the way it's been done forever. All of the pneumatic gravers are relatively, in the history of jewelry, brand new to the market.
Yes. And if you can afford it, it'll save you a lot of heartache because, oh my God.
Yeah. But, even learning to do it by hand, learning it, just the old fashioned way, where you've got your, your graver and your handle and off you go. That's,
and that's hammer and chisel. So like this, for anybody who's confused, this is power assisted hand engraving, and then this would be hand push engraving, and then there's hammer and chisel engraving. I've just learned that.
Right. And actually that you have, the new little hammer is traditionally used for that, for the hammer engraving.
The little Kinko hammer.
The Japanese engraving.
Exactly.
Yeah. I can't remember who I saw using it. I think maybe Douglas Pryor uses the Kinko hammers on his chasing and repousse, and I was like, oh, I guess I should buy one of those. It's fun to tinker.
There's no reason not to use it on other things. It just come from a different
Hallam.
And
Hallam as well.
Yes. Oh gosh, I just admire his work so much. He's just like such a master, and these materials that are like mind-blowingly difficult to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that's my engraving setup.
Did we have any more questions, Helen, from the YouTube watchers? No?
Nope, that's pretty much it.
Sorry. What was that?
I said no, that's pretty much it.
I am curious what sharpening system you decided on. I mean, because you probably tried multiple ones, and maybe the little tiny engravers, it's like it works better with one than another.
I mean, I have not tried all of them. I have only tried the Lindsay graver sharpening system. I've not tried the GRS system or any of the, like that crazy tool that you sit on a power hone and all of that.
Oh yeah, there's the power. There's also the plastic templates that you can put stuff into. They like fit together.
That's the Lindsay.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the Lindsay template. I can show you. Maybe. Sorry. I wasn't expecting to show this, but
I took an engraving class and did like terribly at it, but the woman who taught it could not have been nicer, and she had some of those and showed us, and I just had forgotten what they were. Yes. There's some are red and some are green. Yeah,
they're all different colors. I've got a whole giant bag of them here, but depending on the graver geometry that you want to create, these are pretty cool. You use these you can do it by hand or on on a diamond stone or on a power hone. And these just allow you to create perfect angles. So if you think about it, took me a while to figure this out. If you think of this as the tip of the graver, this is the shape that you're grinding. Do you know what I mean? Like, so this is how your graver tip's going to look. And then this is the heel. And then so you just work your way through these, and they make it really easy. It looks confusing, but it's not. It took me a minute to figure it out. Once you do, you're off and running. With these microgravers, because there's so little material here, you can do these by hand on a diamond stone really quickly. The bigger ones, it's a chore. It can be done by hand if you don't want to deal with a power hone, but it takes a long time to grind one of these carbide tips down by hand.
Oh, yeah.
But you can do it.
Yeah.
Yep. So that's what I use. But I know a lot of engravers like the GRS system, and it kind of just depends on your preference. I like to not have more power tools in my shop, so I kind of like to do it by hand. But I do have a drill press that I use as a power hone. I just don't like to use it.
Yeah.
Don't know why. I like to do it by hand.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm with you. I tend to. She's got a million tips and tricks for the flex shaft, and I'm always reaching for my sanding sticks, right? In my file.
Yeah.
I'm just. It's
got a drawer full of sanding sticks. Yes.
What I learned Jennifer does a lot more production jewelry too, and so time is of the essence for that.
Yeah,
absolutely, and that's something I've never been good at. So kudos to you, Jennifer. I am the slowest maker on the planet, and it doesn't matter how efficient I try to be. I just futz and take a long time to do what I do.
The only thing
you're not alone. It took me 10 years to get to this point. So,
well, production jewelry has taught me some tips and tricks for getting things done a little more efficiently. But I mean, the craftsmanship of what you do when you are doing hand engraving, or you're doing hand enameling or repousse and chasing, is that's an art form that takes time, it takes skill, and it takes craftsmanship. And to get that level of craftsmanship, it takes work, it takes hours. And for production to get faster, it takes work, it takes hours. But there's a very different there's a sliding scale when it comes to faster's not always better, bigger's not always better. Sometimes taking more time and understanding what you're doing is the way to go. You can't rush through things. So
yeah, I think some people try to start engraving, and I was guilty of this too in the beginning. I tried to work fast because I had seen people working fast, and I'd made friends with Peter Cusack, who is an English engraver who's like just known throughout the world for his incredible banknote engraving. And he saw what I was doing on Instagram, and he just, out of the kindness of his heart, I'm telling you, engravers are the best community. Out of the kindness of his heart, he direct messaged me and said, slow down. And And then he kept kind of mentoring me as I went, and he would say, lighter touch, like
Yeah.
amazing. I've found these are my people. These engravers are my people, I swear.
Amazing.
So sweet, so kind-hearted and generous. But he's been super helpful too, that like for me to learn that like, no, it's not a race to the bottom here. This is a slow technique, and you go slow. Like he told me he spent, I don't know, 3 months on a 1-inch area of an engraved banknote. Think about that. So I was like, oh, okay, that's perspective. I definitely need to slow down.
Yeah.
So,
which is fine, right? Then it allow yourself the meditativeness of it, right? Let it become,
for sure.
So that it's less, like you say, it's less a race and it's more of a meditation.
What was it that Jeff DeBoer was saying? He was like, give yourself the luxury of time, give yourself the permission to take the time to do what you need to do and to do it well. And, and that's how you get it done. And that's where you earn that craftsmanship. It's not through doing it, faster, better, more. It's the skill is learned by doing it the correct way, And
then if you can speed up, great.
And it will speed up, and it will get faster naturally.
Yeah.
Because of muscle memory, and because you know where the tools are, what your go-to is, how to sharpen things. It will get faster as you go. So that's just the natural progression of it. But yeah, giving yourself the permission to take the time, the luxury of that, is important.
And I frequently say to my students, beginning students, it's like, do it by hand, right? Like use the sanding stick or use the file rather than the flex shaft or the buffing wheel, because things change so quickly when you're using a power tool, and if you don't really know what you're going for, right? Like do it really slowly first so you can kind of understand how you're removing the metal or moving it or changing it. And then that way you can make choices, conscious, opt for a particular shape or finish rather than have it just be all the corners are rounded off because you just buffed the crap out of it, right?
Well, and there's so many schools that will teach you, like in beginning jewelry, how to do that, how to go through those steps of sanding and how to go through those steps of polishing. And so students get the idea that you have to do that on every single thing. And it's like, if you don't mess it up to begin with, you don't have to go through all those steps because
use less solder.
Exactly. Use less solder. Don't scratch the surface. Don't scratch a polished surface if you want it to be polished, and then scratch it all up to remove all the metal to make it polished. It's like
Charles Luton Brain makes the point that, don't put marks of process on a piece if you don't want them there, right? Like if you want a little divot there, fine. But if you are going to have to take it out later, don't put it there. Figure out another way.
Don't go sanding a perfectly polished surface with 200, 400, 600, just because your teacher told you that you have to do that in order. It doesn't mean you have to do it in order on everything in every situation. So, yeah. It's like sometimes you can start at 600, just take out something light. So, it's all part of the learning curve, Oh my gosh, Teresa, thank you so much.
Well, this has been wonderful.
My pleasure
to see your work in action, sort of, and your studio space looks like it's a lovely, serene. I know you said it was a mess outside of the camera, but
oh yeah, we can't rotate any further than this. Here, let's just bring it right back to my. There you go.
You have beautiful artwork around you, I can see, and it just looks like a really wonderful space to create what is really exquisite and wonderful work that is both charming and deeply meaningful, clearly, to not only you, but to the people who buy it. So, thank you for putting all of that thoughtfulness out into the world.
Absolutely. We appreciate
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's an honor. Congratulations for your little feature in the Metalsmith magazine.
Absolutely. Congratulations on that. That was brilliant.
Yeah, I was excited about that. Yeah, it was a thrill.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. So for anyone out there, if you are at all interested in, checking out more of Teresa's work, do check out the newest Metalsmith magazine. Check out her work on Instagram and her website, of course.
Yep.
And we will have links to everything below. And thanks again so much for spending time with us and talking about your work and your tools.
Pleasure to get to know you a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely my pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And next time, let's talk about your tools.
We have lots of places, lots of tool tips that we've talked about, but yeah. we actually have done a little bit of torch firing. We have a little tool, I don't know if it's local, that we like for that. So
yeah.
Well, I'm just like looking at your little organizational system back there, Jennifer, of your magnetic containers.
Yes.
I'm like, that's a good idea.
Jars. They are spice jars.
If anything.
Brilliant. What you got in there? What do you have in there? I need to know now.
On this side, I've got, those are my wax working tools. So I have all my wax burrs and drill bits. And I have another one just like that on this side that's got little finishing tools. So it's got sanding drums and finishing buffs and things like that in it.
Don't you have one for your solders too?
I actually have another one that has my solder in it. So it's like hard, medium.
Oh, look how cute that is. Let me show you what I have for my solder.
Doot, doot.
Really gross.
Yeah. Yep.
And look, this is flux. I just stick this flux on here and I did this.
Swear to God, I had one very similar to that, a bead container like that I was using for my solder, and
kind of sad.
And I just needed to get it up where I could see it and off the surface. So yeah, so I've got it kind of on the wall there. So yeah,
I think I need to upgrade. I need to upgrade to your system.
It depends. Whatever's working for you. The system I use, because I have things separated. I have a bunch of different solders, silver solders from different suppliers, because they all have slightly different proprietary alloys, and so they melt and flow at different temperatures. So
interesting.
I have.
Julia is a hardcore tech nerd.
Yeah, I'm a hardcore tech nerd. So
yeah.
I can tell she likes to talk about alloys. I love this.
Yeah, I have little containers.
Oh, wow.
I'm all like, these are Fry, Rio, Hoover and Strong. And
my goodness.
And then inside them, I do the same thing you do with the flux. So I have these little, they're just the lids from like watchmakers containers. And then I have little chips or whatever and flux in there to help keep it clean, because you always want solder flux too, of course. And I'd probably do what you do, which is just drop a little water on there to reconstitute it. So yeah, that's what I do.
But mine's all over the top of the lid, like a crazy person. Like, why do I not just have this in a different container? I don't know. Like, look at that crusty flux on the top of there. What am I doing?
It's working.
I don't know.
It means it's where you need it to be. It's like,
all right.
It's not to love. I mean, this is the thing. It's like, and I love this as like the final thing for our talk. It's like students get this idea there's just one way to do it, because they have the first teacher who teaches them, they'll all go make these, or they'll all put them on, pill boxes or whatever. And I'm always telling my students, go learn soldering from 5 different people, because everybody's
true.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
What works for you, like Lori Talcott, she only stick solders, right? All of that exquisitely detailed filigree, that woman is putting like 18 gauge piece of solder wire touching onto it, right? Like mine would be a mass of just a flooded sea of tsunami.
Same.
Yeah.
But it works for her,
Mm-hmm.
I'll use paste solder whenever I can get away with it, because that's something I learned in production, and I can just get everything right exactly where I need it, and I know how it works, And
okay. So do you use paste solder on anything, or are there some things you won't use it on?
Oh yeah, there's some things I won't use it on. I mean,
like what?
Traditional soldering, of course, is the way to go when I'm doing most things. But if I'm sticking, part A to part B, or it's in a weird place, or putting 2 parts together that are hard to stick together, yeah, I'll use the paste solder, because I can like around an edge and do that. But for bezels and ring seams and things like that, I'm using regular solder. But yeah, for earring post, for if I'm like a chime ball, things like that, where it's like tricky to get the solder exactly where you want it, paste solder is great for that, because you can like, you know, because it's got solder and
Paint it on and go.
You just have to be really
I've got it.
good ventilation with the paste solders, because
yeah, and it's great for one of the best things I found it for is sweat soldering situations, because it's already flat, and so you can kind of
spread it.
Spread it right on.
How's that go? How's that go again? Got it. Yeah, I've got some, and it just sits here, and I keep thinking I should use that for something. I think I got it thinking I would use it for earring posts, and
yeah, it's great for like posts with pads and things like that, where you're sticking parts together. And it's just, you know, dip it and go, and it's great because you don't have to use additional solder and use all that other stuff. But I think the tricky part with it is that you're still looking for the solder to flow after the flux. And I think some people will see the flux flow in the paste solder, and then the solder will like center, but it hasn't flowed yet. So it'll stick, and people are like, oh, it's kind of weak. And it's like, well, you didn't flow your solder all the way. So they took it up to the flow point. They just took it up to the center point, and it'll break. So
are you looking for that bright line?
Yeah.
Same thing. If it has that sort of granular, almost sandblasted look to it, it hasn't melted. Like basically the tiny particles of powdered solder that are mixed in with the paste, the flux,
balled up.
Right. I was also going to say, if you've had powdered solder for a while and it's gotten hard, you can thin it. You can thin it with mineral spirits, or you can thin it with, some people actually even use mineral oil.
With powdered solder? Not
the powdered solder, the paste solder.
Oh, paste solder.
Paste solder. So if you have paste solder that started to dry out, like if you've had it for a while, like you can get paste solder in syringes, and then you can also get it in tins. And if you get it in the syringes, I have a syringe that still works, but I need to I have some syringes that I need to like cut them open and like scoop it out so that I can, you know, salvage the paste solder. But yes, you can mix it with mineral spirits and thin it down, and so then it makes it more accessible in terms of like spreading it on things or dipping things into it, right? Because if it
doesn't thin well with water. So
right, don't.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask. Like, you can't use distilled water or something like that.
Not with the paste flux or paste solder. No, it's they actually sent me a container to thin it down. The people that manufacture it, and later on published a thing in Oxen that said, just mineral spirits is all you need.
Is really all you need.
Interesting.
So I have some little tins of the paste solder that's gotten really dried out. And so I'll like basically just like take a dental tool and scoop some out, put it in the lid of the tin, and then put a drop of mineral spirits in it and sort of stir it up. And then I can use that either to brush it on something for filigree, or like to dip something in for earring posts, that kind of stuff.
Right.
The main thing is you really, really, really must use good ventilation when you're using paste solder, because the flux that's in paste solder is the fluoride bearing stuff that you really don't want to breathe. It makes hydrofluoric acid in your lungs, and that's not good.
Oh, yeah.
But so just, you know, a little safety warning. I mean, as long as you have good ventilation, you're good, and you're not using that much of it, right? Like, you know, you're not glomming. You shouldn't be glomming on great quantities. But yeah, it has its place.
Always use ventilation is the story. The moral to the story: use ventilation. There you go. All right. Well, thanks everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, Teresa. All right. Are we done? I guess we're done. We'll put the links to Teresa's Instagram and Teresa's website in the description. I will also put the link to Liza Nemchan. How do you say her name?
Neshamkin.
Liza Neshamkin's medium green pitch, which is indeed the Northwest Pitchworks recipe. So the Northwest was Ann Prozakowski. I believe she sold that business to Deborah Montgomery, I think. And then I think Liza bought the rights from Deborah. But in any case, according to Ganoxen, which is a pretty good source for this kind of stuff, Liza's pitch is indeed the same as the Northwest Pitchworks pitch, right? Which many, many people, including Nancy Megan Corwin, really love. So
yeah, I like it too.
It's good stuff. Yeah, that's what it smells really good. You know, it
does.
It has a lovely.
It smells like pine.
It has a resinous scent to it. The color is not super gorgeous, but it smells good. All right. Well, thanks so much. And